We are finally back on the damn Honda, boys.
So welcome back to the channel. Sorry if my voice sounds kind of nasally right now. I'm like just kind of coming off of being sick a little bit, but it has been so damn long since I worked on this car. And I want this thing to run because we're so freaking close. So we got 4 goals for today. The 4 goals for today's video are to get our boost controller completely wired up, get the fuel pump installed, get our boost and AFR gauge installed, which I got something so freaking cool to show you guys for that. And then the 4th thing is to take care of the whole idle air assist valve situation that we got going on here.
First thing I want to tackle is the idle air assist little delete that we're going to be doing. Now, I already have the whole coolant temp fitting taken off of there, and I took off the line that goes from the idle air assist valve to the other port on the intake.
From the research that I've done with these deletes, all you need is this tapered thread plug and a block off cap for the barb fitting. What I can't actually find is what is inside of those ports. If there's coolant or if it's just vacuum or what it is. It's an idle air assist, so one of them has to be vacuum. I know that coolant comes up on the bottom of the threaded portion because that little temperature controlled thermistor there on the actual idle air assist valve itself, it stays open, I believe, at anything below 130 degrees Fahrenheit or closed. I could have that backwards to assist the idle on cold starts, and then once it warms up, it doesn't do anything. So if that one nipple that goes to the manifold is a vacuum source, I would like to use that for like the blow off valve or a boost gauge or something like that. But for now, I'm not really 100% sure what it is. So we're gonna put a block off cap on it and a plug on it in this video just so that we can get this first freaking start on this thing. So the first thing I'm gonna do, just because it's easy, is I'm gonna get that vacuum cap just slid onto the barb fitting. I can't tell you what size this is. I have this vacuum cap left over from when we did the Subaru build. And then once you put that on there, I would just put a zip tie or something like that around it, which I'm gonna do because I got a zip tie right here. And when you're zip tying barb fittings, make sure you just zip tie it nice and tight right underneath the barb. All right, she's tight. Now on this threaded piece, I am gonna put a little bit of thread sealant on here. You can use Teflon tape too. I just like the thread sealant a little bit better. Up here in Canada, we call this pipe dope. I don't know if you guys call it that in the States too, but up here, this is pipe dope. Get her spread around, make sure we got good coverage in all the threads. Then we can get her threaded on there and seal up that hole. Now, like I said, this is a tapered thread hole, so you're not gonna be bottoming this thing out. You're just gonna be tightening it until she's nice and tight and sealed up, and then call her a day. And there we go, idle air assist deleted. In the last video, I did mention that we were gonna run our vacuum source for a blow-off valve to one of those ports. I don't know if either of those are vacuum yet. I don't think they are, but I don't wanna lead you guys astray and give you false information, so I'm not gonna confirm or deny on camera if either of those are vacuum sources. So if you guys know for sure, drop it in the comments down below so that the people watching this can know, because I cannot seem to find it anywhere. And without ripping this whole intake manifold off, I do not know what those ports go to. I can see a coolant line under this one, so I know there's coolant here, but this vacuum port, looking inside of it, you can't see if it's going past the intake manifold or into the intake manifold or what. So with that being said, let's move on to our next project and our second last project in the engine bay for this video, and that is gonna be wiring our boost controller to this 2-pin purge valve connector, which is gonna be super easy because we got this good old 2-pin connector kit off of Amazon. I swear to God, this entire build is just eBay and Amazon parts. So in this kit, we got a whole bunch of things. We got the female ends of the connectors and we got the male ends of the connectors. Now, obviously, you guys probably know how a connector works. These 2-pin connectors are gonna plug in just like that. Click on, super easy. And then you can unplug them super easy too. But these are empty connectors in this kit, so we gotta build the pins for them, which is super easy. And we don't even need to buy any wires because our boost controller wires are pretty long, and we're just gonna snip the wires on the factory purge valve and install pins onto the factory purge valve wires. So just for the sake of the length of this video, I'm not gonna show you guys how to properly pin a connector or anything like that. There is instructions on this kit, and there's lots of videos on YouTube, and I believe I've shown in some of my videos in the past on YouTube how to do it as well. So we're just gonna keep you guys on the tripod and time lapse through building our boost controller harness.
right, I know it looks like even more of a mess than it was before we started, but we're making progress, I swear. You can see right down there, our harness is built and it looks super clean, nice and tucked with all of the wastegate lines to our good old boost controller, which sits right down there. Now, the only reason there is lines all over the engine bay right now is because I finally decided where I'm gonna run the boost and blow-off valve reference lines to for my boost gauge and for a good old blow-off valve. I hooked up a 5/16 emission line to the factory purge valve fitting on the throttle body since we deleted our purge valve, which is this port right here. This one's for a brake booster. This one is for our boost and blow-off valve vacuum lines. So this 5/16 line is running the same route that we ran the 3/8 line for the brake booster in previous videos, down nice and tucked with the fuel line, behind the battery, behind this coolant reservoir, down into the fender right there. The rest of the lines come up behind the ECU, up to the firewall, whereas this line is actually gonna get snipped right here, and it's gonna stay in that little area above the fender liner. And then we are gonna use this adapter fitting right here, which is a 5/16 hose barb to a 3T fitting. These are all 1/8 NPT. Then we got little tiny vacuum nipples that tee off. So this T is gonna have boost gauge and blow-off valve right there, and then the line coming from the intake manifold into this. This is literally the only way I could figure out to make this work without making the engine bay a mess full of hoses. This way we're tucking it all to the side, then you can't really see it. And it's still gonna be a really good vacuum source because that is a 5/16 hose, so that allows a lot of air to flow. So we should be good. But before we start running vacuum lines through the firewall and figuring out our whole setup, I gotta show you guys our gauge mounts that we got because these things are freaking sick. Sitting inside of the car, I want people to not know that this is a turbo Honda. So if we put gauges up there, everybody would know. If we put gauges over here, everybody would know. But if we put our gauges down here, the average person looking in the car would have no idea. Now, if you guys remember from our iDoing head unit install video, there is a cover that sits right down there by those sunglasses in that little cubby hole. Now, if we take a flathead screwdriver and we just pop that guy out like this, you can see she comes out nice and easy. Now, that cubby hole is honestly really nice in this car for daily driving. You can put money in there, sunglasses, whatever you want, but there's a cubby hole right under it. And there's a cubby hole here and cup holders. Don't mind all the dirt and grime. This car needs to get cleaned out. So imagine if you had a gauge pod that could just pop right up inside of here like it's a factory piece. We actually got 2 different gauge pod setups sent to us by Cars Deluxe Designs. This one here is meant to be a vent pod mount, which mounts on this vent right here, and I will pop a picture up on the screen of what it looked like on their website. So they sent us out this one too, just in case one day we do put an oil pressure gauge or something like that in the car, because for now we're only going to be running 2, so realistically we only need this one. One thing I will mention is that this gauge pod here is specifically designed for the AEM X Series line of gauges. This one here is meant for regular gauge pods. You just need to put a rubber band around them and they'll fit in there nice. Here is a factory AEM X Series gauge mount. Nice and small, it's plastic, the hooks are nowhere near as long as the metal mounts for a regular gauge pod. Here is the X Series gauge pod mounting bracket that I modified. As you can see, the holes are a lot more oblong. I just took a drill bit and reamed it out a little bit so that then there is a lot more room for adjustment on these glow shift gauges. Because as you can see with the mounts here, they actually don't line up. So you gotta ream the holes out to make it work. Here's what the regular gauge mounts look like that come with the glow shift gauges. They're big and bulky. They're supposed to be able to squish the back of the gauge up against the pod when the pods are sized correctly for these gauges. But in this case, they're not, so this little X Series piece is gonna work perfect for us. Now, if you look at the back side of this Cars Deluxe Designs gauge pod, you can see that this just peeks out the back. And if we try to use this piece, it is way too long to even work whatsoever. So we just take the X Series gauge pod mount, and now you can see that the X Series gauge pod mount actually hits the side of the plastic on the mount right there. And if you put your bolts and nuts on the top, it will make it nice and secure. And really, all that's gonna take is us putting this in a vise, tightening the vise up on it, taking a drill bit, and then we gotta ream these holes out.
Let's see how that went. Oh yeah, I actually went a little bit too much on the one. She's like a freaking hot dog in a hallway now. Oh my God, that looks so sick. Get this X series mount slapped on there. We got some washers and some nuts. We're just gonna get these tightened up with the little 8mm 1/4" socket, which is honestly enough. Like, these do not move at all. This is sleeper as hell, and I love it. So for this downpipe install, let's start at what's gonna be going on the back of the turbo. We're gonna start with one of these 4-bolt metal gaskets. Then, because this CX Racing kit sucks, we gotta run this spacer on the back. So it's gonna go gasket, spacer, gasket, downpipe. And with that being said, since we have a spacer on there, these little black short M8 bolts that come with the CX Racing kit that are supposed to mount the turbo, or not the turbo, the downpipe, are not gonna work because they need to pass through the spacer and 2 gaskets. And if we set the spacer on here, you guys can see that the bolt does not even get through the frickin' spacer. So we got a new idea. I pounded these bolts into the hole. They are the perfect length. They're gonna go through the spacer and both gaskets, and they're gonna bolt up. So on both of the inner holes of the downpipe that are closest to the passenger side of the car are gonna be bolts, and then these 2 are gonna be studs. That way on the studs, we can at least set the downpipe in there and it's not gonna fall out. This bottom bolt comes out nice and easy, but this top bolt, I had to hit it with a hammer to get it in there, so that's not falling out. It's a really, really tight fit. So I do have a second one of these gaskets kicking around somewhere. I need to find it. But before we get to that, first thing we gotta do, we are gonna take this plug out of the downpipe finally, and we can get our wideband AFR sensor installed. Now this sensor is a glow shift sensor. It is brand new from Glow Shift, and it's probably just a Bosch sensor that Glow Shift puts in their kit. Oh, would you look at that? It actually says Bosch right on the AFR sensor. If you guys can see it right there, if it focuses, it says Bosch. So that means she is a good quality product, nice and German made. Now we are gonna fully tighten this thing up once we get it in the car, but I'm gonna use my oxygen sensor socket here and just get this thing snugged up a little bit, at least off the car. Oh yeah, that's tight. Our wideband sensor is peeking out right back there. That is gonna get destroyed by flames. We've gotta get this gasket slapped on there with the flat edge towards the turb ski, then our spacer. Then we need another gasket first. I gotta go find the other one. Well, I cannot find the other gasket to save my life. This is what happens when you don't work on a car for an extended period of time. You end up losing small shit like that. So I gotta get one ordered up, but for now I got the exhaust just bolted up on there with one gasket in the spacer and no gasket on the downpipe to the spacer side. So that means we are at the point of routing everything for our gauges. So we gotta find where that AFR sensor is gonna go through the firewall and where we're gonna run our vacuum line for the boost gauge through the firewall. But we can't run the boost gauge through the firewall until we know where we're setting up our vacuum line. So we got our 5/16 line run from here down around where the battery's gonna sit right to here. Now that we got the fender liner in, we can kind of mock up where we're gonna put this. Now, I think we're just gonna zip tie this bronze fitting to that wire harness right there. And this is the brass fitting that we are gonna be using. I already showed you guys this, but now we got pipe sealant on it. Everything's tight. So let's rig something up here, see what we can figure out, and then I'll show you guys the final product. Ooh, I like that. So we got the 3T brass fitting going there. The 5/16 fitting coming from the big old 5/16 line that comes behind the coolant lines up to the throttle body right here. Then we got one vacuum line coming out the top of it. Behind the ECU comes out right here. We're gonna run that through probably the same place that this AFR sensor harness is gonna go through. And they're both kind of coming out near the same spot, which is nice. Then the other vacuum line just goes straight down right to our blow-off valve, which worked out absolutely perfect, and it's clean and it's hidden. And with the battery in there, no one's ever gonna know that's there. So that area is pretty much finalized, and these lines are all pretty much finalized. So I'm gonna get the battery slapped back in there and see what this looks like. Definitely a tight fit
But at the end of the day, a tight fit is a good fit. That is pretty much what the bay is gonna look like, which is crazy. For how crusty everything is, all this really needs is a good powder coated intake manifold, powder coated valve cover, powder coat the turbo. The bay definitely needs to be sprayed in this car, and there's lots of little rusty bits, but this thing's supposed to be a sleeper. It's not supposed to be a super pretty nice car. So I'm liking the look. This is exactly what we were going for from the beginning.
3 days later.
All right, I don't know where I left that video off right before this, but I'll pick it up on this a couple days later because I ran out of time. So the only things that we are gonna get done in this video is get the gauges installed, and then I wanna get the rest of the downpipe put in and the 2 other O2 sensors. Well, the factory AFR sensor and the downstream O2 sensor. So this is our CX Racing downpipe. This is the second half of it. The first half, as you guys know, is already bolted up in the car. We're just missing 1 gasket still. But this downpipe actually does have 2 O2 sensor bungs, which is awesome because we can retain the factory sensors and the factory AFR sensor can still data log in the ECU. And then I removed the 2 factory O2 sensors, and you can see I marked this one US and this one DS. That just means downstream and upstream. What downstream means is that this O2 sensor is downstream of the catalytic converter, and that one is upstream of the catalytic converter. And upstream basically just means before the cat, downstream means after the cat. So your downstream one is just a regular O2 sensor, which means that it is a 0 to 1 volt sensor, and all it does is monitor oxygen content in the exhaust strictly for emission purposes. It's not super accurate. It's not a 0 to 5 volt like an AFR sensor is. Like I said, it's just there to make sure your vehicle's meeting emissions. But for now, we're just gonna put this back in so that it's nice and sealed up. Your upstream O2 sensor or upstream AFR sensor is the sensor that actually monitors the air and fuel content in the exhaust. And that is the sensor that reads your short-term fuel trims. It's what adjusts the amount of fuel your engine wants to put into the exhaust to make the oxygen and fuel content at the optimal ratio that the engine wants it to be. Like when it's at idle, you're sitting around a 14.7. Wide open throttle, a high 10s, low 11s, whatever the car wants. So we are gonna go ahead and get these 2 sensors installed into this downpipe, get this downpipe slapped into the car, see how it all fits up. We're gonna be using this V-band clamp that came in the CX Racing kit. Hopefully this one doesn't snap like a couple of the intercooler pipe ones did when you got them a little bit tight whatsoever. And hopefully we don't blow out these welds because as you guys can see there is no backside penetration whatsoever. Clean these sensors with a little bit of brake clean just because they are pretty carboned up, and we will get the upstream one installed. But that should be tight enough. She is tight.
It would have been a great idea to bring a flashlight down here. I can't see. And I had nuts. Where are my nuts? I found my nuts. I grabbed all the rustiest nuts I could find because underneath this car is not clean. Yet. It's not clean yet. Get this upstream sensor plugged in first. Click. No! I just dropped the nut. Where did that go? It definitely did not hit the ground, but I heard it. I heard it somewhere. You're up there somewhere, bro. Oh, I swear to God, underneath a car is a bottomless pit, and when you drop nuts, they just enter this bottomless pit, and they just never reappear. Like, I feel like there's just this little clubhouse where all these nuts hang out, and they just watch me and my face looking for them like a dummy. I can't imagine what I look like right now to them, to those nuts. I don't think I'm gonna find these ones. Is it like in the subframe? What the flip, dude? I'm hoping that maybe if I just start feeling around, I'll just feel a nut. That's not a nut, that's a piece of my transmission. Come on, nut, come to me. This is literally the only thing I didn't want to happen. It is in the endless, bottomless hole that is this subframe. And I don't know where it is, so I give up. I'm not usually that guy. I usually like to find my nuts. But in this case, if I'm being honest, I don't really care. Round 2. These sensors might not be able to bolt up to the factory locations. I am slowly realizing. Don't drop the nut. Oh my God, I did it again. I found that one though. Bro, this downpipe actually looks like it fits terrible. Maybe the upper downpipe location's off? I don't know. Oh, it seems like it's kind of shaping up now. Well, that must be why they put the flex pipe in here. Cause that fits like shit. Ooh, quality.
It is a couple days later now, and I realized that with that downpipe, it's not lining up properly because our fitment is not 100% up top, and I'll show you what I mean.
This downpipe, I have this tightened up quite a bit. We got that spacer on the back here, but as you can see right where the camera's focused up right here, there is still a freaking gap. The guy can grab that gasket and move it, and you can see the air gap on this side versus this side. I don't know what we're gonna do to get this downpipe to seal. I think I'm just gonna get it running with exhaust leaks for now. We might have to cut that downpipe, bolt it up, and then build a little extension on the downpipe and custom fab this downpipe up, because this piece up here is making everything at the bottom not line up properly, and it sucks.
Some of the comments I read from you guys said that this kit is for the sedan, not the coupe. So there is a little bit of fitment issues if you get the thick wall manifold like I was explaining before. So we got the downpipe in, it'll at least start the way it is. I didn't get the 102 sensor plugged in because it didn't reach, but we're gonna deal with that a little bit later. At least it's in there. To finish this video off, I wanna get the gauges in because that was kind of the main point of this video.
For the gauges, all we gotta run is this vacuum line that we got running to a T that goes to the blow-off valve and the manifold, and this wire harness, which is for the wideband air fuel ratio sensor that's on the downpipe right there, through the firewall of the car into a place where we can access it from the interior. And there is really only one option here. First option is I need to freaking clean this interior because it's dirty. I already went through and pressure washed all of the floor mats, but I gotta take this little vacuum and vacuum up all the crap that's in here. And then there is a grommet up on the driver's side, right above the gas pedal. And that is the grommet we're gonna go through because that is 100% the easiest one to get at. And it's honestly the only one I can find. Plus, that's right there, right by our little blend door actuator here with that green connector. And then we're mounting the gauges right there. So it's gonna be a nice straight shot right to where we're mounting the gauges. But first off, let's get the interior of this thing's vacuumed out.
Because I don't like working on dirty cars. I don't know about you guys, but I don't like rolling around in rocks and dirt.
Not squeaky clean, but clean. Clean enough to work on. On the AFR sensor, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna run this wire, loop it as tight as we can around the brake master cylinder, and then we're gonna plug it in the engine bay, and then this whole wire is gonna go through the firewall. That way, if we need to replace the sensor, we can unplug the sensor and replace it just in the engine bay, and this connector is gonna be there. And then this harness will run through the firewall, and this is gonna plug directly into our gauge. Then for the boost gauge, it's pretty simple. We literally just gotta run this vacuum line through the same spot. We run this AFR harness.
And then all of the other wires are gonna be on the interior of the car. And we'll wire those to some little Attribution terminals, which we got right here in this little bag. I'll put a link to these in the description on Amazon.
And then after we get these run, this engine bay is gonna look freaking complete, pretty much, I think. That is what she is gonna look like, boys. No more hoses all over the place. Everything's all neat and tidy. That, my friends, is an engine bay. We are so close to the finish line, I can taste it. Now I'll go over everything in the engine bay and show you guys how I routed it, because that sucked. I got some cuts on my hands. That manifold is real tight to get in there, but we got it. So first off, the sensor coming right off of the downpipe comes out. We got it kind of doing a little half loop there because we had some extra wire. So we just looped it just to clean it up and zip tied it to the main engine harness down there. Then it goes in behind absolutely everything down there, comes up in our mess of hoses and lines. That's all gonna be covered by the wiper cowl, so you won't see any of this. You can see the connector tucked back there right in behind that 6AN line. And you can also see the vacuum line right next to it. Then they both go right back into that grommet, just like we said they would. Kind of hard to see because that harness is in the way, but if I move this harness a little bit, you guys can see right where they go into that grommet right there. And the easiest way that I found to get those wires through was I took a coat hanger after I took an X-Acto knife and just cut the grommet really, really gently. You don't want to push too hard because you could slice wires. Once you cut a little slit, then I shoved the coat hanger through there, but the coat hanger bottomed out when I shoved it through this side. So then I was like, I must be hitting the grommet on the inside. So then we hopped under here, which you can see I got my vacuum line and my wires hanging here. Right there's the grommet, and you can see where the two hoses are coming out. Or not two hoses, one hose and one wire harness. And as you guys can see, they are coming out right near this whole center console area. So we're gonna be able to pop some of this front trim out, or we might be able to even just run them right above that blower actuator and zip tie them up to those harnesses up there, keep them out of the way, and run them right up in behind the radio right there. We might not even pull anything out, but we're gonna see. The fuse panel is on the driver's side, right by the clutch pedal. We can easily just put an antifuse in there, and then we got a power wire, then we just need to run a ground. So let's get going on the interior, and let's see what these freaking things are gonna look like once we get them in, and then I'll show you guys how we install them. Never mind, I just did some digging off camera, and I just realized that I'm not confused at all. I just didn't take all the parts out. This is what happens when you sit on a build for this long. Both gauges are gonna work perfect. We got the harness for the boost gauge, and it runs straight off manifold vacuum. So all we need really is the power and the ground, because we're not gonna be data logging the boost gauge. Our tuner can just use the map sensor readings for boost. Then our AFR gauge has a harness coming out of it that goes into our little AFR controller here that we bought off of Glow Shift. This wasn't that cheap. I want to say I paid like $100 Canadian for this thing or something like that, because my gauges I bought off a buddy of mine and he didn't have it. So you can kind of see on this box it says sensor, analog output, but for some reason this one says analogy output, whatever the hell that means. Then you got power and gauge. So the gauge plugs into here. This harness is going to be going to power, so it has the red and black wires on it. We'll go to an antifuse with those and a chassis ground. Then the other harness goes straight to the gauge, and then this data logging harness, or analog data log, we're not going to need it because we're going to be running both of the factory AFR and O2 sensors. So Matt's going to be able to read that on the ECU when he tunes the car, and then he can just watch this gauge for the true AFR right behind the turbo.
And I apologize for my voice, boys. I don't know what has been going on with me this video. Like, I'm losing my voice. A week ago when I started this video, I was sick. My nose was running. I was all stuffed up. All you guys are bugging me about why the Civic build's taking so long. Life's just been throwing me curveballs, boys. But we're getting there. Let's get these gauges in.
I wanted to stop this time lapse halfway through just to kind of show you guys what we're working with here. As you guys can see, we got the gauges completely in place. They have all the wires run to them. The vacuum line is run to them. They are 100% solid as for the gauges. Now we just got all the wires on the ground there that we got to run. But as you guys can see, this is nice and clean. You can't even really see any of the wires for the gauges. These are all head unit wires. All the gauge wires are tucked down under that harness back there. So all we got is the one connector going to the AFR gauge, and then the vacuum line and the other wires coming out of the boost gauge. Now, one thing I did have to do was I had the boost gauge on this side, and that didn't work because the vacuum fitting was hitting the plastic trim on the back side of the gauges there. So I moved the vacuum line to this side. Now the vacuum line clears. So if you guys buy this piece from Cars Deluxe Designs, which I will put a link in the description to it, you will have to put the boost gauge on the passenger side. But now that we got all that done, I'm gonna go ahead and get the whole upper section here, the head unit, this whole trim piece, everything installed up top, except for this bottom kick panel because of the fuse box, because that's where we're gonna wire in the power for our gauges, and then we gotta find a chassis ground.
I did something that I'm not very proud of. I wish you guys could smell through the camera because it just smells like fuel right now. Whoops.
That little plug right there on the bottom of the fuel rail, that's supposed to be there.
It wasn't there before.
There is frickin' fuel all
all over the place in this engine bay now. All over the intake manifold. It's all over the freaking floor. And this shop absolutely reeks right now. So I got the plug put back in the bottom. We got the 2 lock collars put onto the plug. And I pulled the fuel pump fuse. I wasn't even trying to prime the fuel system and check for leaks. I was just turning the key on to check the gauges to make sure they work because we got everything wired in now. And I forgot to pull the fuel pump fuse. And then I started smelling gas. Didn't take me very long to find the problem. But we got her fixed now, so I'm curious to actually put this fuel rail back on, prime the fuel system, see if it leaks. But our gauges are doing some weird stuff too, so we got to figure out what's going on with them. I don't know if it's the gauges themselves because they're cheap or if we have a lack of power issue. We got 12 volts. I'm charging the battery right now. That's why there's that noise in the background. So hopefully after the battery charges for a while, both gauges kick in, but one's not even turning on. The other one's really dim red. So I don't know what's going on. We got some troubleshooting to do. I ended up just putting the fuel rail back on off camera because we already did it on camera once. But one thing I did want to mention to you guys is I did take out the phenolic spacers that were sitting under the fuel rail. The only reason I needed these spacers is because the bolts that came with the Jack Spania Racing fuel rail kit were too long for it to bolt up to the factory intake manifold with no spacer. So you had to put the spacer there. And then the injectors had a bunch of slop in them. Now the injectors are nice and tight but still rotate freely. The O-rings are completely sealed. I just had to put smaller bolts in there and bolt the fuel rail straight to the manifold. So now she should be 100% good to go. I should be able to prime this fuel pump and there should be no leaks. So I'm gonna put the fuel pump fuse back in and we're gonna check again. All right, round 2. Let's see what happens. Why the hell are the fans running? Oh man, I just want to freaking turn the key and be able to start this thing right now. We're so close, boys. Look at this damn gauge. What's going on here? We got a dim right one and then no power to the left one. I don't know what's happening. I have the AFR controller hooked up. The wires are run. I'll even show you guys how we ran this harness. So this red taped wire right here goes to this add fuse on the fuse block. It's fuse number 8. And if we look at this diagram right here, fuse number 8 is just an empty slot right next to the TPF S1. And I checked it. When you turn the ignition key on, it has power only with ignition. So we went with that one. Then our ground wire, you guys can see there is a factory ground right there. So we just put a spade connector on there and went right to that factory ground. We do have both gauges teed into the same power wire and the same ground wire, but I've done that in the past and not had any issues. So I don't really know what's going on here. Let me dig into this off camera a little bit and see what I can find. But before I go look into it, as you can see, no more fuel leaks at the fuel rail. So that's a positive sign. I'm glad we found that now by accident because that would have been really disappointing to find on first start day. So far in this video, I have humbled myself 2 times. Once with the fuel rail. I don't know how I missed that. Second time, no matter how many gauges you install, all of them end up being different. And I haven't installed any glow shift gauges. This is my first time, but I did find the problem that we were having with the one gauge being dim and the one being off. And conveniently, the way I figured it out was actually reading the instructions. Kind of funny how that works. So I taped these with colored tape just so that I know what each one is. The orange wire, you're supposed to wire to a headlight fuse so that the gauges dim when you turn the headlights on or off so they're not so bright at night. I don't want them to dim at night. I like them to be full brightness, so I did not wire that one in. But what we did before was we just wired the red and the black wires to the fuse panel. So red to ignition voltage and then black straight to ground. The yellow wire is supposed to be a constant 12 volt fuse. So not with ignition, just a constant 12 volts. And the reason they do this is because these gauges actually do have computers in them and they have a memory. So what that does when you wire it to constant battery voltage is we just set the color of these gauges to red. If I turn the key off and then turn it back on, they're gonna stay red. If you don't wire in that yellow wire and you wire the yellow wire just straight to the red wire, it's still gonna work. The only difference is that color is gonna reset to the default blue every single time you shut the ignition off. So I'll show you guys what we did. We ended up going to 2 spots on the fuse panel down here with our little addifuses. Can't remember the exact number. I believe it was fuse slot number 8 and number 20 or 21. I can't remember this top one, but this upper one had power all the time, battery voltage. Number 8 had power with switching the ignition on. So those are perfect. And then the ground, I'm still grounded in the same spot I showed you guys before, right on that factory ground up there. As for the way we actually routed the gauges, I went up through all these metal beams, zip tied it once right here on the trim panel and just tried to route them as clean as I possibly could so that they don't interfere with our feet at all when we're banging gears. And as you can see, there is absolutely nothing in the way of our feet. So last step, I gotta get all of these wires zip tied into a harness nice and clean, and then they are going
gonna get tucked up in here and zip tied to this harness so that they're nice and tucked out of the way. And then we gotta get this bottom trim panel reinstalled. Holy boys, look at how good this looks. This interior is coming right together. Honestly, these 8 gens, dude, I love the digital dash. I used to hate it. Now I love it. RPM's right up top. We got our boost and AFR gauges right by our shifter. Nice and sleeper, just the way I wanted it. I cannot believe that I found a company that actually makes a gauge that sits down there. They look so freaking good. And that is a final shot of what we're gonna be seeing when we're banging gears in this thing, boys. I am so excited. Last thing I wanted to mention is I did get the intake built for the turbo. I don't have these 2 T-bolt clamps tightened up, but getting this freaking CX Racing filter on this 90-degree elbow was a pain in the butthole. I had to like heat the whole rubber ring up with a heat gun and then silicone spray it and have my dad like hold it while I pressed it on and pried with a screwdriver. But we got it on, the hose clamp's tight, the elbow's on there, and it fits like a glove. Probably about the only thing on the CX Racing kit that fit perfectly on the first try. Well, I guess it didn't because I had to freaking work that filter on there. But I am super happy with how far we got in today's video. Might have been a little bit of a long one. Honestly, this has been stretched over like a week and a half, 2-week period. But if you guys made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope these videos are helping you guys out. Or if you're just watching to support the channel, thank you guys. I appreciate you. We broke our goal in 2023 to hit 5,000 subscribers. We're almost at 6,000 now, which is crazy. I never thought this would happen. I just started making videos because I like building cars, and now it's getting a little bit overwhelming, but I'm just trying to navigate through the process and still try to keep the same enjoyment out of building cars as I had when I first started doing this. And I think it's working. I know I said last video that we were 1 video away from a first start, and we didn't get her started in this video. Next video, we're gonna get the fuel pump installed, and then we are firing this thing up. I promise. Peace out, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next video. Put the fuel pump in this thing. We'll see you there.